Hindi ako pinasok. Okay, wala din akong control kasi guest lang ako. Sorry.
Magiliw, pelas ang sinanganan, alam ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisiin. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bukaw, may nilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kislap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagdiningning, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may magdidilim. Lupa ng araw ng walhati pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang hinigaya na pag may mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Omo namong nama, oni koning bebiyanga mo, no tipo-tipo mikloni, kwang nga hamo, tina hamo, kodayit king mo inang namo kloni, dayit kibalo namo, oleto padomo namo, bogobi namo kloni, pinaagi ning dait no Kristo Jesus. Amen.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we thank you for another day that you have blessed us to come and gather. May each and every individual present be enlightened with your grace as we seek and uncover your divine purpose for all of our events activities. May your light find its way into the lives of every individual who has made this day possible. Lord God, it is our earnest prayer that your will be done throughout this event. Guide our intentions to align with your holy will. May all our efforts become a blessing to the rest of the community that we will be serving and bring glory to your name. Guide us to become leaders who are blanketed with love, service, and hope for the world that we will be serving. All these we ask, in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Good day, everyone. My name is Roel Rabanera. I'm the Executive Director of Xavier Science Foundation, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. A warm welcome to you all wherever you may be participating. Madagascar, Kenya, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Indonesia, or here in the Philippines. This webinar is titled Land and Food Systems and is the fourth of a series of webinars for this year 2023, organized by Ateneo de Manila University, Ateneo de Davao University, Xavier University, Ateneo de Cagayan, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network Philippines, and the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability, in partnership with the Asian NGO Coalition for Agrarian Reform and Rural Development, or ANGOC, and the Rural NGO Cluster of the Global Land Tool Network. As you may be aware by now, food systems are very complex. It relates to other big problems such as climate change and social inequity. It is also intergenerational. Food insecurity can have tremendous impact on the future of the young generation. Moreover, it is global in scope, affecting everyone. Unfortunately, those hardest hit are the poor and the marginalized. The high cost of healthy diets, coupled with the persistent high levels of income inequality, put healthy diets out of reach for around 3 billion people, and that's in 2019. To underscore the broad scope and the interconnectedness of these challenges, we are very fortunate to listen to our partners today from Africa, South Asia, and the Philippines. After a brief introduction by Mr. Don Marquez of the Asian NGO Coalition for Agrarian Reform and Rural Development, or ANGOC, Mr. Antonio Quizon, also from ANGOC, will give an overview of the importance of access to land in ensuring food security for all using the food systems lens. Joining us from Nairobi, Kenya, Mr. Arak David James of Namati will share with us his experiences on securing access to land and strengthening tenure security, thereby ensuring food security for local community. From Madagascar, Ms. Mino Ramaroson of the Wairo Commission of Sub-Saharan Africa will discuss the participation of smallholder producers, especially women, in the food value chain from production to consumption. Ms. Shanhidar Khan Ripa of the Association for Land Reform and Development, or ALRD, from Bangladesh will talk on sustainable farm practices and safe environment. After the presentations, we will also have brief reactions from two students. The first reactor is Ms. Cherise Angel Casurao, a third-year student from Ateneo de Manila University, and she will be followed by Ms. Mirimas Majid, a graduate student from Aju University, Graduate School of International Studies in South Korea. Before I call on Don Marquez to give us the opening remarks, let me just go through some logistical reminders. First, I would like to suggest to change your Zoom name into this format: institution, underscore, and then your name. In my case, it will be XSF underscore Ruel Rabanera. Second, kindly make sure to mute your microphone if it's not in use. And after all the speakers have finished their presentations, we will have plenary discussion. Feel free to use the chat box if you have questions or comments. We are also doing a YouTube stream via Ateneo de Manila University's official YouTube channel. Finally, I would like to inform everybody that this webinar is being recorded. Again, I welcome you all to this webinar, and I look forward to your full attention and engaged participation in the discussion. Thank you. Asanteni sana. Let me now call on Mr. Nathaniel Don Marquez to give his opening remarks. Don is the Executive Director of the Asian NGO Coalition for Agrarian Reform and Rural Development, or ANGOC. ANGOC is a regional coalition of civil society organizations that promotes land and resource rights, smallholder agriculture, and human rights and civic participation. Don, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ruel. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can speak louder too if you want.
Okay, sorry, it's raining here and my connection is not that good. So I'll share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay, I'll share it again. Can you see it now?
Yes, done.
Okay, again, pleasant good afternoon to all, and welcome to this webinar number 4 on land and food system, which I think is very timely as we just celebrated the World Food Day yesterday. I think the discussion speaks of itself. I can't remember when was it, but there was a survey in the Philippines among grade school students, and a question was asked, where do rice come from? And some of the students responded from the grocery. So I think we take it for granted, but talk about the food systems, and in particular also how land rights is as an important element in achieving food security. This webinar number 4, there are 2 main objectives. One is to raise the discourse on land tenure and management and its crucial role in long-term food security through the food system lens. And this will be explained later by our speakers. And the second is to discuss the smallholder food producers' access and rights to land, which is an indispensable step in addressing food insecurity and malnutrition. Ruelas mentioned the organizer here, basically the Zero Hunger group on SDG number 2, which comprise of the Ateneo de Manila University, the Xavier University, Ateneo de Davao University, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network Philippines, and Ateneo Institute of Sustainability. And we in the Asian NGO Coalition for Agrarian Reform is very much appreciative of being invited to be part as a partner organizers of this event. ANGOC is a regional network of civil society organizations established in 1979, working on food security, land rights and agrarian reform, sustainable agriculture, and participatory governance. We have members in Bangladesh, Cambodia, China, India, Indonesia, Nepal, Philippines, and Sri Lanka, and our partners work at the national level in promoting or advancing the thematic areas that I have mentioned. On the other hand, the Global Land Tool Network is an international institution hosted by the United Nations Human Settlement Program, or UN Habitat, based in Kenya, and it is a network of various land actors in the land sector, which includes rural civil society organizations, urban civil society organizations, research and academic groups, and professional groups. The ANGOC is part of the rural CSO cluster of this Global Land Tool Network, and which aims to promote access to land in achieving security in food. I want to introduce Xavier Science Foundation. You have been hearing about Xavier Science Foundation, I think, in the past, but ANGOC has been working also with Xavier Science Foundation in the province of Bukidnon in securing food security of indigenous people through the introduction of participatory enumeration tools such as a social tenure domain. With that, thank you very much, and I'll give back the floor to Ruel.
Thank you, Don, for providing us a brief introduction and a background on how all these organizations have come together to address food insecurity and hunger and malnutrition. Thank you so much for giving us your time to open this webinar. To provide us the context and the link between land and food systems, I will now call on Tony Quezon to take the floor. Tony is the former executive director and chair of the Asian NGO Coalition. Most of his work has been with farmer organizations, social movements, and civil society organizations. He was a founder and the first Asia coordinator of the International Land Coalition, and currently serves as board member in two civil society organizations working with farmers. One is CARD on agrarian reform and organic agriculture, and CRISE on in situ conservation of plant genetic resources in rice. Among his more recent work is land governance in Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tony Quezon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Magandang hapon ho sa ating lahat. We are coming together in very uncertain times. And in this situation, we often think about our next meal or our diet. But for other people, they have to worry about where to get their next meal. We worry about what to eat. Other people worry about whether they will ever get to eat at all. Let me share my presentation. I hope you can see it, everybody.
Yes, Tom. It's okay.
The title of my presentation is Land and Food Systems in the Asian Context, looking into trends and issues. My presentation is divided into 4 parts. The first is the challenge of poverty, food insecurity, and malnutrition in Asia. The second is to look at Asia's smallholders. What are their characteristics? The third is to look into some emerging trends and issues related to smallholders and land rights. And fourth is to outline maybe about 4 or 5 areas for policy and action. The challenge of food security is that nearly 12% of the world's population was severely food insecure in 2020. The situation really grew worse because of the COVID pandemic. About 148 million people more fell into food insecurity just on the first year of the pandemic. Poverty lies at the root of hunger. About 1.1 billion people lack healthy diets due to poverty and food prices, which have been increasing to record highs since 2022. And close to 70% of the world's poor live in rural areas. So poverty is not just about the lack of money, it is about powerlessness and being remote from centers of decision-making and lacking the opportunities for education and so forth. When we talk about food security, we also talk about undernourishment. Over half of the world's poor and over half of the world's undernourished people are in Asia. About the number of undernourished people in Asia is about 425 million. This is about over 55% of the 768 million people globally who were undernourished in 2021. According to the World Bank, some 320 million people in Asia live in extreme poverty. The computation of extreme poverty now is $2.15 to $2.15 per day. Undernourishment disproportionately affects women and children. Malnutrition can cause stunting of growth among young children, and so it can hit them far into the future. For adults, it robs them their capacity to do work, and therefore they fall even more into poverty. Asia is also home to about 75% of the world's farming households. These are households that have farms of less than 2 hectares. In many countries, the smallholders or small farmers are the main producers of staples, rice, corn, root crops, and pulses, and therefore they are important for food security. Asia is also home to about 70% of the world's estimated 370 million indigenous peoples. There is a silent crisis in Asia. The great irony is that small producers are also the most vulnerable to hunger. And a major reason for this is the lack of access control over productive resources, land, water, forests, and coastlines. In the Philippines, fisherfolk and farmers have consistently remained among the poorest sectors in the country. The poverty incidences are almost, well, a little less than double the poverty incidence for the whole country. In Vietnam, poverty rates are highest among the 53 ethnic minorities compared to the rest of the population. Now, much of Asia is considered to be as transforming economies. What do we mean by this? Transforming economies means that poverty remains overwhelmingly rural, yet agriculture is no longer seen as the main engine of economic growth that it once was, and small producers are no longer given the support that they need. This may be tragic because poverty is predominantly rural and agricultural, and yet rural-urban disparities grow wider than ever. And there is always the danger of farmers, and especially small farmers, being left behind. The question we often face is, will Asia continue to be able to feed itself? Many of the Asian countries have prided themselves to work along lines of self-reliance, especially countries like India, for example. Asia has 59% of the world's total population, but only 34% of the world's agricultural area, 15% of the world's forests, but there is very, very wide diversity. It is 4 times more densely populated than Europe. In the coming years, Asia's cities will be growing. Within the next 20 years, the Asian Development Bank predicts that another 1.1 billion people will live in the region cities. What are some of the emerging trends and issues? I'd like to highlight a few major trends that are and issues that persist. No? One is that agrarian reforms or land reforms, as some call it, they remain unfinished. After gaining independence, many Asian countries instituted agrarian reform programs at different points in history. The Philippines itself has one of the longest running agrarian reform programs in the world. In the past 30 years, actually ours is about 70 years old, but in the past 30 years, over 7 million hectares of public and private lands have been officially redistributed. Yet many farmers are not able to enjoy their full property rights due to agrarian disputes, overlapping claims, indebtedness, and the unfinished subdivision of their lands, because about 40% of the lands transferred to farmers were under collective titles or collective cloas, and this is being split up or being individualized, much of it in the coming years. The impact evaluations of the Philippine Agrarian Reform Program have reached similar conclusions, and this is a summary of it. While the program has contributed to overall poverty reduction, the improvements have not been bold enough to bring significant numbers of the rural poor out of poverty. And therefore, we started looking into why this is so. And one major factor has been the absence of systematic support services, agricultural support services, and the resulting low productivity among farmers. If you look into the periods of redistributive agrarian reforms in Asia, you can see that they started after the war in 1945, and you can at least about 15 countries implemented different types of agrarian reform. But this one lists down the redistributive, where land was actually redistributed. So you have these countries and also these countries, and you can see that the Philippines is one of the longest here. What are the results? The level of redistribution has been mixed. So for Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, China, Vietnam, they were all very extensive in terms of the percentage of arable land and beneficiary households. The Philippines could rank among them, might rank among them, except that it took too long. And there are still a lot of unresolved issues. So you can see here, this is based on a combination of data from different sources that we put together. The high impacts of agrarian reform, where there was rural transformation, industrialization, significant land redistribution, and poverty reduction, was China and Vietnam, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. The modest where the Philippines would be the changes were limited land distribution and modest gains in poverty reduction. The poorest agrarian reform programs have been in Pakistan, Indonesia, and Cambodia. The second trend is the shifting of food tastes and diets. With the growing population and with growing urbanization, the tastes of consumers is moving away from traditional staples towards commercially grown meats, dairy, processed foods that require more land resources and energy to produce and to transport. By 2030, more than 55% of the population of Asia will be urban. Meanwhile, agricultural households themselves are increasingly becoming consumers. Let's look at wheat consumption, which has been increasing over the years. This is, it has grown in 10 years, 10 to 11 years, it grew by about 34% compared to the growth of rice, which was only 14%. In the Philippines, wheat consumption has doubled in about 10 years. And one of the reasons for this is the Jollibee chain, or you can say the whole fast food system. In Vietnam, consumption has also grown with the growth of instant ramen noodles. And here the statistics is 8.56 billion packages in 2021 alone. We've also grown as consumers of meat and dairy. If you look into the diagram here, next page, if you look into the global use of land, you can see this is the Earth's surface, this is the water, this is the habitable land, and you can see that of the habitable land, about 46% is used for agriculture. But in terms of the use of agricultural land, 77% is used for livestock, and only 23% is used for crops, for growing crops. This is worldwide. But the 23% of agricultural land used for crops contributes 82% of global calorie supply and 63% of global protein supply. So the choices that we make as consumers will have impact on resources, including land, water, and also that will have impact on the emission of greenhouse gases. There is a growing impact of climate change. About 3.3 to 3.6 billion people live in contexts that are highly vulnerable. Asia and the Pacific are among the most vulnerable. We had, the region had over 225 million internal displacements in about 10 years. Those who are poor and without land have been the most vulnerable to climate change. And agriculture is the sector hardest hit by climate change. The way that climate change hits, it hits in many ways. One is that it increases the competition for water, it increases the competition for land. Extreme weather events may affect agricultural productivity, rising prices cause people to fall into poverty. And in a country like Bangladesh, there could be massive loss of land. However, only 1.9% of global climate funding goes in support of smallholders. We also find over the past 15 to 20 years, we also find that there has been increasing competition for land from the biofuel industry. The biofuel is plantation-based. Palm oil is a major biofuel industry and a driver of rainforest destruction. In Indonesia is the largest producer of palm oil, and from 6 million hectares in 2011, Indonesian oil palm plantations now cover over 14 million hectares in 2023. 14 million hectares is almost one half the size of the whole Philippines, only planted to one crop, which is palm oil. Biofuel is also produced from other crops, sugarcane, corn, and soybeans, and therefore fuel competes directly with food for people. There is also increasing competition for water. Asia has 61% of global population, but only 36% of global freshwater resources. And as we extract groundwater, it depletes the aquifer and contributes to desertification and salinization, which in many countries. So the next struggle will be not just a competition for land, but competition for water. There is increasing conversion of agricultural lands due also to urbanization. In Bangladesh, about 1% of agricultural land is lost every year. In the Philippines, the figures are somewhat similar. Let me just show also what the impact is. Based on a 2020 ANGOC study on land conversion, the Philippines destroys farms that could have otherwise been used for food production. So you can see here that the totally converted area, agricultural area for 2017 was over 150,000 hectares. If you compute that in terms of the average yield, the potential yield would have been over 208,000 metric tons of palay. This would have been more than enough to cover the deficit in rice production in 2018, which is 196,000 metric tons. So you can see here that we destroy farms that could have otherwise been used for food production, and maybe we did not need to import back in 2017 and 2018. And 2 years ago, the Philippines became the biggest importer worldwide of rice. We even beat China. So China and the Philippines are 1 and 2. We've been changing position over the past years. So you can see that the land conversion is estimated at 1.3% between 2018 and 2019. But the conversion, the land conversion of rice lands is about 3.1% for that period, 2018 to 2019. The other trend is the supermarketization of Asia's food market. There is a increasing vertical integration of the food value chain, from production to wholesaling, processing, and retailing. So what we used to buy in the market, and I'm sure even for us here, what we used to buy from the traditional public market is we now buy from the supermarkets. But as food is being retailed to supermarkets, the retail stores are now able to dictate the terms of over their suppliers and leaving the smallholders and small producers in a weaker bargaining position. There are more and more what we call barriers in terms of the capacity of smallholders to access supermarket chains. So even when we go to supermarkets, what do we see? You need a continuous supply, you need uniform products, you need new requirements, permits, product standard certification, and all of these cost money. And therefore, a lot of the farmers are unable to provide or to cope up with all these requirements. So who actually makes money in supermarkets? It's actually what you call the consolidators. So you can find so and so farms, and so in labeling you can see like Dizon farms, for example. But Dizon does not have farms. They're only consolidators. There are also new additional food standards on safety and hygiene, nutrition, labeling, traceability, processing, and packaging. So small farmers and producers cannot afford that. Also, we have growing land conflicts in Asia because of increasing competition. We did, with ANGOC has done several studies on land conflict. The most recent one is 2020. In 2020, in 6 countries, we recorded 1,372 land conflict cases in 6 countries. The area affected is 6.47 million hectares. In terms of, if you compare that, that's about the size of the whole island of Sri Lanka. And that's the size of land that's under conflict. Directly affected by the conflict are about 2.37 million households. If you multiply that by 5 per household, that would be over 10 million people. The drivers of land conflict, the main drivers were private investments, mining or plantations, as well as government projects. There were also conflicts among people or among communities between on shared resources. So the countries covered were Bangladesh, Cambodia, India, Indonesia, Nepal, and the Philippines. With your indulgence, let me just go quickly through the next suggestions or areas for action. I'm not looking for one big solution, but maybe the idea when we look into the challenges is, can we look for solutions that can be multiplied 1,000 or 1,000,000 times? Maybe that should be the approach rather than looking for one big solution. The first is we need to address land reforms and to protect the land rights and tenure of smallholders. Studies show that even where there's not enough land, just giving farmers a home lot can improve their capacity to find work, engage in livelihood, and gain greater access to social services. Studies have also shown that when you have an address, a permanent address, then you are also are more likely to receive social support from relatives in times of distress and social protection. Second, we need to create protected areas for agriculture. We all know about protected areas for conservation. It's about time that we look into protected areas for agriculture, for biodiversity conservation, for the production of food, and also for the preservation of local practices. After all, agriculture is a culture, and we should also support systems by which people have survived for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. The next is that we need to build agriculture and food strategies based on smallholder and family farming. One is that smallholders are productive. Like in India, They produce over 50% of the total farm output with only 44% of the land. Small farms also serve as environmental conservators, as they tend to be more diverse in terms of crops and cultivars. And this will be important to increase the resiliency of small farms of our agriculture against pest, disease, drought, and other stresses. Also, small farms make greater use of labor and provide for employment. We need to build agricultural strategies that reduce food kilometers in the food chain. And the most important is to look into agroecological farming systems that are less dependent on external inputs. Also, by reducing the food kilometers, we also reduce the carbon footprints that cause climate change. We need to recognize the customary land rights of indigenous peoples. In the Philippines, the last remaining forests lie in the lands of indigenous people. Out of the 128 key biodiversity areas, 75% are in traditional territories of indigenous communities. This should provide us with a compelling reason to recognize and protect their rights. We need to address the digital divide for farmers and small producers. Bridging the digital divide would ensure that people and communities are not left behind in an increasingly digital world, where services and support are increasingly based on digital awareness, literacy, and access. So you can see here, people also have used digital skills in community land mapping systems. Finally, and this is for all of us, consider the broad implications in all our choices and actions, whether it's in our consumption behavior, our lifestyles, and what we eat and what we do. In the Philippines, we have the conditional cash transfer program called the 4 Ps. Here we look into the 3 Ps, which is think about people, think about planet, and think about peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ton. Maghang salamat. Tony has given us a very comprehensive and very informative context and perspective of food insecurity and poverty in Asia. He also provided a good assessment of the problems and challenges being faced by smallholder producers. Thank you so much, Tony. One of the recommendations forwarded by Tony is on strengthening land and property rights of smallholder food producers. To elaborate more on that and to provide his personal experience on this, I would like to call on now Mr. Arak David James. David is a Ugandan national who has experience working with local communities on land governance and strengthening of tenure security. Currently based in Nairobi, Kenya, David is Namati's Senior Program Manager on Land, Environmental, and Climate Justice. He has a life slogan. It says, "Sustainable change is that which is initiated and owned by the affected persons." Sustainable change is that which is initiated and owned by the affected persons. That's David's life slogan. Ladies and gentlemen, please let us welcome Mr. Arak David James.
Thank you so much, Roel. Hi, everyone. That's my name. I'm currently based in Nairobi. We work with local communities to strengthen their ability to manage their lands and natural resources. I will quickly share a presentation on the link between land tenure security and food security, how they both relate. Next slide, please. Now, my presentation will focus on Africa as a whole, and then zoom in onto Kenya. Now, for many rural people across Africa, land is their greatest asset. It is their source of food, livelihoods, and identity. Yet there's increasing pressure on land resources to solve many faceted crises such as food, energy, finance, and climate. About 90% of land in sub-Saharan Africa is held customarily. This customary land is home for hundreds of millions of rural people, yet this land is undocumented. Customary tenure majorly remains insecure and vulnerable. Under this tenure, land is usually held by clans or families based on diverse blends of group rights, accessed based on group membership and social status, and used through complex systems of multiple rights. In many of these communities, land and natural resources matters are regarded the men's domain, and women barely participate in land control. Next slide, please. Now, across the continent, there have been some positive reforms. A couple of countries have adopted legislation that supports the protection of customary lands. Over the last decade, several African countries have new legislation that protect community or collective land rights. This move is seen as an attempt to recognize the customary rights of local communities and to mainstream their involvement in resource governance and development. These laws are aimed at securing collective land rights and to place local communities as key stakeholders on investments over their lands. While there is a move towards greater recognition of customary rights, how to implement formal recognition of community land tenure while ensuring food security and making the local communities participate in food systems still remains an open question. Also, in this part of the continent, women are more economically active as agropreneurs, and making them key players of food security. However, their lack of involvement in land control also remains an open question worth exploring. Next slide, please. Now, in the context of Kenya, I would like to consider pastoral communities who own land collectively through their customary ways of life. Now, pastoralism is a livelihood system based on free grazing of animals that is used by communities in marginal rangelands. The rangelands are considered marginal for various reasons, including poor water supply, poor soil quality, extreme temperatures, steep slopes, and remoteness. Pastoralism enables communities to manage their resources in a sustainable, independent, and flexible way. It is marked by rights to common resources, customary values, and provides important ecosystem functions. About 40% of land mass in Africa is dedicated to pastoralism. In Kenya alone, over 80% of the total land is classified as arid and semi-arid lands, predominantly in the rangelands and occupied by indigenous people and local communities who practice pastoralism. Through pastoralism, they have practiced extensive livestock production for centuries. They traditionally inhabit the rangelands based on commonage systems, a form of land tenure security suited for mobile and nomadic lifestyles. This, however, has its share of challenges regarding inclusivity in land ownership, access, and control within their different social groups. In the community, the traditional norms and values shape how they govern and manage their land and natural resources. Much of this land remains insecure and vulnerable to land grabbing, dispossession, compulsory land acquisition by government without meaningful compensation and disregard of the people's inherent connectivity to their ancestral lands. Next slide, please. Now, land tenure in the context of the pastoral people of Kenya is a major question, because land is a major resource for the pastoralists in providing grass and fodder for their livestock. Additionally, it's correct to say that indigenous people's relation with their land and traditional means of subsistence is basic to and predominant to culture, social organization, and language. As far as human rights are concerned, the rights to self-determination, land and customary land tenure and use are most important rights for these indigenous peoples, and they should be enjoyed unconditionally by all of them. A common trait is that most lands that are being acquired or leased out to host large-scale investments do not derive from titled private lands, but rather from the community lands owned by these indigenous people for mega projects, conservation, and climate financing. Next slide, please. I want to give a picture of how the landscape looks like. When I talk about the rangelands of Kenya, this is how it looks like. It's fairly hilly, but it is in the lowlands that lie mostly to the northern part of Kenya. And so they are semi-arid in nature. They have rivers that flow not all year round, depending on the rains. And so the pastoral people move from place to place to be able to regulate the amount of pasture cover over their lands. These lands are inhabited by a population of about 10 million people who raise about 70% of the country's livestock. Now, livestock accounts for 95% of the family income of these people and provides employment of about 95% of their population. Pastoral livestock sector in Kenya, which includes meat, milk, and other products, is estimated to be over R1 billion annually, with approximately 90% of meat consumed coming from these pastoral herds. Despite all this, pastoral communities have largely continued to be poor and food insecure, mainly because of lack of land tenure security, and also because of climate change, which have resulted in low livestock production. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the 5th assessment report, projects that 10 years from now, if nothing appropriate is done urgently, there will be increased food insecurity, negative health impacts, and conflicts at community and regional level over diminishing natural resources. Lack of tenure security hugely affects the rangelands in Kenya, the productivity of these lands in many ways. Other factors tied in a way to the poor productivity include climate change, like I mentioned initially, and also conflicts and other disputes that arise from diminishing natural resources and extreme droughts. Many times, middlemen take advantage of these local communities, waiting for signs of or occurrence of droughts to buy their livestock at very low rates, and then fatten these in their private ranches, then sell at exorbitant rates compared to how much they're able to purchase from the local communities. The local communities' participation in food systems isn't streamlined, making them miss out on the potential income they would have gotten. Also, culture plays a role. Livestock for prestige. Many of these communities are hesitant to dispose of their livestock because it's prestige in society. The number of livestock you have determines your social status. And so they would prefer to sell out smaller livestock like sheep and goat to procure household utilities, while the larger livestock such as cows and camels are only traded when they have bigger events such as marriage ceremonies or payment of school fees, etc. All this makes their livestock herding more of a subsistence venture and not necessarily want to support economic prosperity and their integration into the food systems. However, of late, government seems to be interested in these communities' livelihoods, and so government has been trying to set up a nationwide livestock insurance system. Many people suggest that more direct support, such as subsidies, creation of a system to mainstream the local communities to participate in food systems has to be created. Otherwise, their participation in the food system is still wanting. Next slide, please. I would like to share a glimpse into the gender perspective when it comes to these lands. In the pastoralist setup, structural inequalities and access to land and its natural resources persist. Direct access to land through ownership cuts across the different ethnic pastoralist communities, and it deepens the existing inequalities in the communities. Differences in access among pastoralists have been linked to their existing cultural norms and practices, gender norms, and patriarchal traditions, which lead to the exclusion of some members in the process, especially women and youths. Realizing women's rights to access, control, and manage natural resources remains a challenge in these communities. The unequal treatment of women and men that are regulated by the social cultural norms, which could take some time to be unlocked. The inequality has direct bearing on land productivity and food security, since it cuts out from decision-making a significant human resource, which includes women and youth, and so their expertise and knowledge aren't harnessed in shaping productivity. Next slide. In the year 2016, the government of Kenya passed a law which has been regarded as quite progressive. The law now seeks to secure customary and collective land rights. It provides for a way for communities to self-identify, draft rules and regulations to manage their lands and natural resources, elect a democratic leadership committee to manage their land. The law, in a nutshell, devolves management and governance of land to the communities themselves. This is seen as an opportunity for the communities to be able to make decisions over their land. When it comes to food security, the expected positive outcomes of the implementation of the law is that with communities able to manage and make decisions over their land, they will feel more secure and they will feel more incentivized to invest in food production at their community, within their communities. Security of tenure over lands has been linked to productivity and food security, in the sense that tenure security reduces land disputes and conflicts, hence promoting effective land use. Also, perceived sense of tenure security creates an enabling environment for local communities to invest in food production due to increased certainty that they will be having their land in the foreseeable future. Improved local governance by communities over the lands puts them as administrators over the lands, and this helps them to shape and use their land based on their extensive local knowledge. The Community Land Act gives a pathway to increase land tenure security, hence directly supporting improved food security and productivity. For the pastoral people of Kenya living in these rangelands, where more than 80% of Kenya's community lands are situated, a strategy we have called legal empowerment is best suited to support strengthen local governance of this community. Strengthening the capacity of all people to exercise their rights, either as individuals or as members of the community, is an approach that has shown impressive outcomes from supporting communities to increase their tenure security, while also strengthening the governance, inclusion, accountability, and land productivity and food security. At its core, legal empowerment is about grassroots justice, ensuring that law is not confined on books or courtrooms, but rather is available and meaningful to ordinary people. Experience has shown that a title is merely evidence of a community's claim. Tenure security, however, is dependent on good governance at community level and empowering community members to understand the law, how to use it, and to be able to defend their claim over the lands that they depend on. However, despite the passing of this progressive law, to date, since 2016 up until now, less than 50 communities have been able to register their lands. This points towards a question of political will towards decentralization of land governance to local communities. Namati and other partners we work with here in Kenya are working to advocate for implementation of this law, not only towards the attainance of titles, but to further deepen local community governance over their lands as a prerequisite for community prosperity and food security. Next slide, please. In conclusion, as Namati, we have put together ideas and a guide that communities and practitioners across Kenya could use to employ the principle of legal empowerment to support communities not only attain titles, but deepen democracy, communities strengthen their own local governance mechanisms to be able to make informed decisions that depend or rely on the extensive local knowledge that they've been able to garner over the decades to be able to tackle the question of food security head on. Last slide, and thank you so much. Asanteni sana. I'll be happy to respond to any questions later on once the question and answer session is open. Thank you so much.
Asanteni sana, David. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences on land tenure, land use, and food security in the context of the indigenous peoples in Africa, particularly Kenya's pastoralist communities, where Namati is working at the moment. This provides a new perspective from us in addressing global food insecurity. Thank you. I will now go to the next speaker to share with us the importance of participating in the food value chain from production to consumption. Ms. Mino Ramarozon will share the grassroots women experience in sub-Saharan Africa. Ms. Mino is a rural development specialist and a gender activist from Madagascar. She is a development economist by training and had worked for national and civil society organizations and international coalitions for the last 13 years. Fluent in English and French, Ms. Ramarozon supports the mainstreaming of gender and women's rights, advocacy on resilience and land issues, capacity building and technical support, project design and research as the African Regional Coordinator and Global Land Specialist for IRO Commission. Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to present to you Ms. Ramarozon.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. Yeah. Yeah, so thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be with you today. I just wanted to explain about Waru Commission a bit. Waru Commission is a global grassroots movement that are present in approximately 40 countries around the world. We also have members in Asia, in Africa, in Europe, in the US, and in Latin America and the Caribbean. And I really want to thank Tony and David for the introductions that they did for my presentation, because it's within that context that we are going to look into why grassroots women are also done the work, and they wanted to present their cases out there to show that that we as a grassroots women movement and the grassroots women are not only just beneficiaries or affected people, but also actors within the changes that should be happening. So that without further ado, can we go to the next slide, please? Just to have a bit of context, David talked about it earlier on, that agriculture is still the backbone of the sub-Saharan Africa economy. And we have these international trades and the global value chains that are going now, that is really affecting a lot the local production of food from the smallholder farmers' perspective, and especially the grassroots women. So with that, we went to do some focus group discussion with grassroots, with our members in a few countries. I'm just going to talk about a few, but we did it in more countries that there, in Kenya, Uganda, Madagascar, and Zambia. And it came out that the issues that the grassroots women are the same, and they are facing the same issues. The first one is really the limited access to productive assets, like land, water, and technology. Another one is about the lack of access to extension services, such as farm inputs like seeds and fertilizers. There is also the other point on lack of access to market. Although they are producing food or they are producing crops, they don't have that much access to markets. And the lack of support that they are facing, it's really something that is very ongoing. And you have, when we talk about that support, it's the lack of investment, the lack of infrastructure, be it roads, the markets, the storage units, and so on and so forth. And then there is still this low bargaining power and low return when we are into the value chain systems, because they don't have the bargaining power, so they are losing on that part. And we can see that the women are still the hardest hit by the value chain abuses because of still social norms, practices, some of the laws that are not gender sensitive. So those are the issues that they have showcased and talked about. So next slide, please. So then we also, because we talk about food systems a lot, but what does that mean for grassroots women? So for grassroots women, it's you say that it's looking from production to consumption, but it's also it's also they are seeing it really with a very complex circular system that includes social and rights component, and it should be something that is regenerative and with local dimension and implication. So that means that we need some access to productive resources, not only for the food consumption and production, but also we need to consider the care work within this food system and the well-being of people when they are eating the food. There is, when we have lunch, for example, with friends, there is this social interaction dimension that we are not considering. So for grassroots women groups, it's about also decommodificating the food. It's not about selling it, but it's also all the social context that it should have. So within that, we said that we should really, when we look into transforming food system, we should address this issue of power imbalance and inequality. And so we say that through some action, changing the narrative when we talk to the private sector, because partnership, because private sector are very strong within the food value chain, and then how can this narrative change? And another part is the part of advocacy. How then can we influence governments to really support the efforts of the grassroots communities and especially grassroots women in producing food? And then we are looking into, for example, the issue of land degradation, the land grabbing, that was talked about by Tony earlier on. The issue also of the agroecology that was talked about by Tony also, so I don't think I'm going to very expand on it, but we have a lengthy discussion that seeds should be looked into. Indigenous crops should be brought back into the factors? How can we address the nutrition crisis through the use of those not using chemical products, not going through processed food, things like that. We really looked into that. And then the issue of monoculture. Tony again talked about it for pure fuel, but again, there is also monoculture that affects food system, especially for women, because, for example, a farmer that are like going to focus on sugarcane will not have enough inputs for the food for the family. Those are the questions that are happening. Then another one is we talked about it already, the issue of land and access to resources. Water was talked about by Tony. The more it's going, the more the water becomes a question. And we say that it's also the issue of labor rights, because farmers are not only those ones that possess land, but there are also the ones that are working for some farmers to also make ends meet. And then the issue of investing into smallholder farmers, like giving the opportunity for women farmers at small scale to be economically empowered. And another point that it's not here, but we said was really important, is also the factor of time, because in food system we never talked about those. Time is a very and we don't give a value on the time that are used by the grassroots women when they are producing, taking care of the children. And that's also why we talked about the issue of care. That is important. Next slide, please. So within those contexts, we say that we should focus on a few points that on what we could achieve in the next few years. So it's those are the points that our Wairu Commission and the groups, our members, are going to focus on. Promotion of sustainable and agroecological ways of production, like soil restoration, like the use of conservation, how we call production, that's the use of traditional and or indigenous crops and knowledge to tackle the climate-induced yield reduction, for example. Also this idea of crop diversification, so that we can have this nutritional balance. And we had that experience because our groups exist for the last 15 to 30 years. And in Africa, we learned a lot from the HIV pandemic experiences that kitchen gardening should really be put into place, even in slums, because it procured a woman some small food and to have this nutrition balance, like planting pineapples is really helpful. So that's the idea that they say that we really should focus on that. Small plots. And then another point is really the small livestock rearing. For them, they can have always some meat and they can sell it as quick as possible, 3 months, 5 months. And the issue of they really wanted us to focus on the rural and urban links, on this idea of from production to consumption, so that we reduce that intermediary, and how to ensure that the fresh products are not wasted, how to have those infrastructure that allows them now to be safe and to have a good price for the production. Next slide, please. Yeah, sorry. So then in this, how we decided to look into all of this in these virtuous like or circular cycles. So if you are aiming of having this food security and economic empowerment, we should look into secular rights for women and how to do that through advocacy, through also putting into place local to local dialogues with traditional authorities so the woman can access land, but also how to support or how to promote these actions like David was talking about, protecting customary lands, and then how then also the issue of more productive that will allow now the woman to get more decision on the production, what to produce and how to produce it, and what kind of investment to have, etc., etc. And then when we have those security, then we can look into the access to resources and such as I'm talking about financial, I'm talking about infrastructure, I'm talking about extension services in there, and how can we work with now the devolution of the governments to ensure that women have those access inputs and those financial assets and the equipment, then we can say that we are looking into a more sustainable and increased production with increased yields, respecting of waste. And if we have access to market, then more money, more then we have this better bargaining power within the value chain. And touching and partnering with local governments, but also other stakeholders, rewriting the social norms that will allow the allocation of productive resources to women at community level. It's not about creating conflict, it's really about how to have that change, and then looking into how to advocate for the governments really to promote small-scale agriculture, because what they do is supporting, as was said earlier on, commercial farmings, large-scale farmings, monocrops and things like that, but also change this narrative from being beneficiaries and the poor to really becoming agents and producer that also are really essential for the food system. And then another one is also support ongoing local initiative, because there are already a lot that is happening on the ground. It's not that they are not the groups are not doing anything. They need to eat, right? So they need to do something. So there is we have example of support like initiative in Kakamega counties in Kenya, for example, or they are doing soil restoration. So they have increased their yields, and they are diversifying their production. We have this example of shea butter production in Ghana. So the women are planting shea, and then they are transforming the product, have shea butter before selling it. So it's added. There is this added value on the production that they are doing. And another one is really, if you wanted grassroots groups to really be on the table for decision making and not making the decision for themselves, then there is this need to always have the capacity built in, ongoing, and training of the grassroots women here in the agribusiness value chains, but also in other issues on like leadership, like what does it mean if we do gender budgeting, etc., so on and so forth. And then Another point is really convinced the financial partners and the development actors really to help the governments to provide incentive to grassroots women, such as low interest soft loan, for example. Yeah, I think I'll stop there, and I'm really happy to answer to all of your questions. I really thank you for listening to me.
Thanks, Mino. Thanks for providing us the situation and advocacy of the grassroots women in sub-Saharan Africa and recommending actions to address the many challenges to food insecurity, including problems related to access to land and other resources. Thank you so much. There will be some opportunities for you to answer some of the questions that are already there. But for now, let me now call on our resource person from Bangladesh, Ms. Shanhida Khan Ripa. Ripa will share with us their experience in sustainable farm practices and safe environment in Bangladesh. Ms. Shanhida Khan Ripa is a program manager of the Association for Land Reform and Development, or ALRD. Her work focuses on women's land rights, water rights, and agriculture. She is a column writer and a women's rights activist in Bangladesh. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Ripa from Bangladesh.
Thank you, Roel. And thank you all who are participating in this good webinar, and good afternoon. Welcome to my presentation. Is it visible to all? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Ripa, go ahead.
Oh,
Visible
thank you.
and audible.
Thank you. So, sustainable agriculture, the topic of my presentation, that is sustainable farming system and safe environment. So, what does actually we mean about sustainable agriculture? The main characteristics of sustainable agriculture is a way of raising food production that is mainly it would be healthy for men and animals both, and it doesn't harm the environment, and also humanitarian for workers, and provides the fair wage to all farmers. And those are not farmers, but they have their contribution because they give their labor to the farming sectors. We should also consider them as farmers. The sustainable agriculture integrates four main goals, that is the productivity, environmental sustainability, economic profitability, and social and economic equity. Sustainable agriculture considers considerably mainly what it is less agrochemicals. That means it requires organic pesticides or organic fertilizer, and for the soil health and soil betterment. And also it requires high local imports without markedly compromising output and financial benefits. In Bangladesh, agriculture is the center of our economy. It ensuring our food security and continues to be the chief source of employment in Bangladesh. Now, agriculture is accounting for the 23% of GDP, the gross domestic product, and 45.33% of labor force in 2002. Recently, our Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics, they published their agricultural census, and this report told that 29.62 million of households live in rural areas and 16.56 million households are involved in agriculture. These rural smallholder farmers are feeding the 169.4 million people living in 147,000 square kilometer with cultivated land accounting for 60% of the total land area in Bangladesh. That means the population size is very big and the land is very small. So the problem, so what is the problem in Bangladesh? Nowadays, we are facing that the modern agriculture system, which requires the more irrigation water, pesticides, fertilizers for hybrid or high yield production, it has a negative impact on sustainable agriculture and food security in Bangladesh. So now it is a concern, significant concern, and under threat from the continuous degradation of land and water resources, declining yields due to indiscriminate use of agrochemicals, vulnerability to natural disasters, high population density, 1,168.7 people per square kilometer in Bangladesh, and also the inequality in land distribution. So the Bangladesh agricultural system, yeah. After the independent war in 1977, agriculture practice in Bangladesh has changed dramatically because of its the Green Revolution, which was introduced in 60s. That the changes brought crop productivity that showed the new technologies, so many technologies, and mechanization, introduced high yield varieties and increased chemical use and boost the production. That is changing after the independence and war, but it was started from the very beginning because of the Green Revolution. So the then Pakistan period, the Green Revolution mainly focused on the polder system to protect the coastal areas and from the riverside or the Bay of Bengals. So the then Proof mission was introduced, implementation of folders like the dams, the big dams, to protect the lands of coastal areas. So these changes have made positive effects and reduced many risks in farming, but it also increased some significant cost like topsoil depletion, groundwater surface water contamination, water logging, continued neglect of the living and working condition of laborers, increasing cost of production, aggression of contract farming, and the disintegration of economic and social conditions in rural communities, particularly the rural poor. So we found that some contributing factors are there which actually affecting the sustainable practice, farming practice, and our environment, and also the food security. The impact of 3Cs. The 3Cs are the climate change, COVID-19, and recent conflict. So these 3Cs has given birth to another C, which is quietly evident. That is the cost. The present inflationary challenges is the higher prices of agricultural inputs, high production cost, restricted access to the market for agricultural products, interference of brokers, aggression of seed companies, shortage of agricultural labor increased. But there is another prime factor that is related to land, and this is very increasing in Bangladesh, that is the land grabbing. and also the industrialization and commercialization of agriculture, unequal land distribution of public land, etc., negatively impacted in our country's food production and growing the potentials of food insecurity. Recently, the government statistics that showed that in total 61,000 acres of khas land, that is a state-owned land, fallow land, allotted for developing economic zones to accelerate industrialization. The government has intention to set up 100 economic zone in Bangladesh, so that needs lands, and that's why the government allotted government public land, it is called khas land, for setting up 100 economic zones. So another driving factor or contributing factors, that is for the challenges, challenging situation of smallholder family farmers. So Bangladesh historically is a country of family farming. Among the family farmers, smallholders are predominant, and they lack access to and control over land and natural resources. So in Bangladesh, our constitution and our our 5 years action plan, the national action plan, recently it is a 8th 5-year action plan that mentioned that farm households having land up to 150 decimal lands are termed as smallholder farmlands, farm householders. So that is the definition of smallholder farm households. And in Bangladesh, mostly in rural areas, we have no contract farming, we have no big farms. So mostly the smallholder family farmers are there, and they are facing some challenges, that is their land-related problems, which both affected by the government and also affected by the natural disasters. 4.02 million households of smallholder family farmers are still need cultivable lands, because we have land erosion, we have salinity intrusion, and we have land grabbing. Contract farming and land grabbing is not only the prime factor, because nowadays another factor is here to increase this situation, that is our floods and river erosion, and also some other which is called the Rohingya refugees. Government gives some shelters, and some areas, you know that, which is the current international situation, and they are spread all over the countries, and that is another concern of us. And the fair price of food production is also controlled by the middleman, and the government has no control, and the syndicate is very strong. And that's why the smallholder family farmers are facing indebtedness and financial losses, both of natural disasters and also for the middlemen. And forestry is another important contributing sectors. But the problem is the government, not recognized the indigenous communities' traditional land systems, and they are not counted as smallholder family farmers by the government. But the indigenous families have their own culture practice system, is agricultural practice system known as Zoom farming, that means slash and burn. So their contribution is not actually accounted, and even their government services are not adequate for the indigenous communities living in hill areas and also in the plain areas. So Women in Bangladesh, actually, they have limited access to land and other natural resources. Their contribution in agricultural sector is increasing day by day. Nowadays, 72.6% of rural women are directly engaged in agriculture, but they are not recognized institutionally as farmers. That's why they are always neglected in getting the agricultural services from the government institutions. They are not getting access to financial resources from the banks and other technologies also. But in rural areas, 53.1% are women, and they constituted only 15.8% of the land. We have a policy called Khas Land Management and Distribution Policy. Khas land is mainly the government-owned land, and it emerged from the riverbed. So government, they allocate this land for the agricultural and non-agricultural purposes. So agricultural purposes, there is a policy. This policy allow men and women joint ownership in khas land. Those are landless, and those have some land only for their homestead without their farming lands. So this policy government adopted in 1987, but it has a controversial provision for women, that is single and widow women or divorced women cannot get the allotment of khas land without an able son. This is very discriminatory to women. And another challenge is youth in Bangladesh. They are not interested in engaging agricultural activities or farming activities. They think it is not profitable and it is not dignified. So the government, they have no any initiatives to attract the youth in agricultural sector, but almost 1/3 of the total population in Bangladesh is youth. Environmentally, environmentally, our agricultural system also controlled by the corporate agri-giants, because the farmers, those are actual farmers, they are care about our environment and ecosystem, but the agri-giants and corporations and their seeds, pesticides and fertilizers are not friendly, environmental friendly, but it also requires groundwater extraction. That means more irrigation water, that results the over extraction of groundwater, that results deforestation, consume fossil fuel, etc. are the major features of the commercial agriculture. And also it is harmful for the topsoil of the agricultural lands. You know, this is not a recent phenomenon. This is even not in the case of Bangladesh. It is the overall world case. The global corporate companies are controlling the seed in Asia, not only in Asia, all over the world. And this seed trade taking away women's seed rights from the country's seed sector. So women farmers in rural Bangladesh were devoted from seed selection to sun drying, storage, care, exchange, and so on. The total process of seed management was mainly controlled by rural women before. But presently, corporate garment factories have been run by rural women, and other companies like Monsanto, Syngenta, Bayer, DuPont have taken control of the seed resources. Corporate companies have created a profitable market and developed different business strategies by exploiting the climate change phenomenon. We have seen that in different research papers, that is the world's top 10 seed companies, which control 57% of the world seed market, vigorously exploit the climate change issue for commercial gain. These world-shaking corporate companies are taking steps to trade their climate resilience and seeds prepared for any environmental disasters. So all these things, this has the impact on sustainable farm practices and food security. We called it unsustainable farm practice. So that what we see recently from the global aspects to national aspects, that is Bangladesh was placed 84th in the global hunger index in 2022 among the 21 countries in Asia. According to UNICEF report published in 7 March 2023, 44 million children under 5 are stunted. 12% of women aged 12 to 49 years are underweight for their age and height in Bangladesh. Malnutrition is one of the factors responsible for this. Non-pregnant fertile women in Bangladesh have high levels of micronutrient deficiency. Another report of Food and Agricultural Organization published in 12 July this year, the report said 52.7 million people are in Bangladesh facing varying degrees of food insecurity, with a concerning 18.7 million people suffering from the most severe form. A study by the Consumer Association of Bangladesh conducted in Dhaka metropolitan cities, this report revealed that the cost of living has risen by more than 11% compared to January 2022. And that's why people are suffered a lot, mostly the rural, mostly the poor urban people and also the rural people, but this study only for the rural areas. So due to frequent natural calamities, paddy cultivation is suffering greatly. The UN report also warned of future risk due to climate change, with 22% of rural households in Bangladesh already affected by floods and 16% suffering from river erosion. These environmental hazards contribute significantly to the food insecurity issue. These are the rural women. They are mainly practicing the organic farming. Here you can see some photos of rural Bangladesh. Women are, all these women are practicing organic farming, compost. So, and they're selling these products to other areas. Those are their neighboring villages. And we have some other partners in far areas. They also come and buy these farming compost for the use of their agricultural purposes. And another photo you saw some women. They are leveling the land using spade. These women are the group member of another partner organization of LRD. They taken lease of that land, particular land, and they are farming together.
Ripa, we're running out of time. I think
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is the last slide of my presentation, Royal. So the recommendations I made, that is based on the comprehensive and integrated approach and strategies for the sustainable land management practice, including investment of agricultural infrastructure, climate resilient agriculture, water management for irrigation, improve land tenure system, agricultural subsidy support, market access, encourage organic fertilizer, and enhance technology transfer to smallholder farmers. Also, promoting education and awareness about sustainable farming practice and safe environment can also contribute to long-term food security. Women right to land and recognition as farmer is just a level-headed demand which needs to be guaranteed through amending the policies. And we also want to new act on caste land management and distribution, which the new act will abolish the provision of single and widow women issue, and that is and another is maybe the government should introduce attractive initiatives such as loans, flexible conditions of technology for the youth involvement in agriculture, and also for the recognition of traditional practice of indigenous communities farming and their rights. Government will also ensure the land rights of the indigenous communities, and their demands to abolish the clause of 97 from the EPSATA Act, that is the State Bengal Acquisition and Requisition Act 1950. Thank you all for listening to me. ধন্যবাদ।
Dhonobad Ripa. Thank you so much. Thank you for elaborating on the importance of sustainable agriculture as it provides food that is healthy, safe for the environment, and provides fair wages to workers. From the context of Bangladesh, it's really, really important, but I think not only Bangladesh, but in many other countries as well. I think in the chat box, some can relate also, especially some of the challenges that you are facing right now. Thank you so much, Ripa. So we are now ready for some feedback from our students. The first to share is Miss Sherry's Angel Kasurao, followed by Miss Merima Ismagic. Let me introduce both of them now so they can go one at a time. Miss Sherry's Angel Kasurao is a third-year student in the Ateneo de Manila University, taking up AB Political Science, minor in Development and the Law. She is a student leader and a youth advocate of human rights, quality education, environmental justice, and sustainability. She is a member of the Youth Empowering Youth Initiative, a Negros-based NGO that is currently running a social enterprise called Sagup Negros. Sagup Negros is a food waste mitigation initiative that rescues tons of food waste and unsold fruits and vegetables in local wet markets and converts them into food products and culinary delights for a food eatery locally known as Carinderia. The second reactor is Miss Merima Smagic. Miss Smagic is a Bosnian graduate student from Aju University, Graduate School of International Studies in South Korea. She is a dedicated professional with a profound understanding of the role of civil society organizations in today's evolving world. She has done internship at the United Nations Office for Sustainable Development, or UNOSD, and executed projects that promoted UNOSD and the Sustainable Development Goals through innovative strategies. May I now call on Sherry's Angel Kasurao to first give her reaction.
Yeah, thank you, Sir Roel, for the warm introduction, and thank you to our guest speakers for the very insightful and comprehensive discussion regarding the role of land access and tenure in promoting sustainable agriculture and eventually food systems. So let me start by saying that promoting sustainable food systems should begin by ensuring that our farmers have equitable access and secure tenure to land resources. Last year, I was able to go to a rural community wherein we talked about sustainable farming methods, and I was so surprised when one of the farmers responded that we are willing to adopt these farming practices that you told us that you shared with us. But the problem is we don't own the land that we till, so how can we even practice that? No, so you see, discussing, like for instance, agroecological practice remains to be a challenge because in the very first place, farmers don't even have their own land. So this is how crucial land tenure is in the discussion of sustainable food systems and ultimately food security. So in the context of the Philippines, no, the country has one of the longest running agrarian reform programs in the world, as what Sir Tony mentioned a while ago. However, the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, or the CARP, continuously failed to effectively and equitably redistribute land, which saw the majority of the farmers remain landless, while others struggled to maintain ownership of their land. Among the primary reasons for this, of course, as what mentioned a while ago, are lack of resources and even the tedious bureaucratic processes that farmer needs to go through before obtaining assistance or land tenure, as well as agrarian disputes and even continuous land conversion. So now that agriculture is no longer seen as the main driver of economic growth, unlike before, it is all the more important to strengthen the land tenure of smallholders, and we start by creating land policies and design mechanisms that will promote land rights using the framework of sustainable food systems. Additionally, as a TB political science student, I also urge local government officials to provide enough representation for smallholder farmers in the decision-making table of agrarian policies. However, based on the talk, I realized that it is not enough that land is distributed to farmers. It is also equally important to ensure that men and women are given equal access to this valuable resource. I personally thank our speakers for discussing the gender perspective to land access, which I believe is very important because gender is often sidelined in the discussion of land tenure systems. So as mentioned by Ms. Ripa, women comprise a significant portion of the global agricultural labor force, but unfortunately, they are a minority of agricultural landholders. The disadvantaged position of women generally in terms of education, access to information, etc., is a major barrier to women's access to land and other productive resources. Alongside that are also customary practices and traditional patriarchal relations in families and communities that discriminate against women. It is assumed, for instance, that the husband, as the traditional head of the family, gets the first chance to apply for a land title. Women are often considered the farmer or agricultural holder only when there is no male adult in the family. After the death of, let's say, a male farmer, ownership of the land is usually transferred to his eldest son and not to his widow. Many families still favor sons over daughters, and land titles are usually given to male heirs due to the thinking that women cannot farm. So how do we go about this, no? And I would like to share maybe four points, no, for action points for us to consider. First, of course, is to enhance public awareness or information and communication in women's land rights. For several years that I've been doing advocacy work in rural communities, it still disheartens me that there are still women that do not know that they also have the right to own land, to secure land. And second to that is building women's leadership and participation in land governance. Again, I mentioned a while ago that it is important that we have enough representation in the decision-making table. And third is to integrate gender and systematic land documentation processes led by governments, civil society, and private sector actors, ensuring that women's land rights are considered in all steps, from planning to final documentation of individual or community land. And of course, lastly, let's raise the discourse on gender norms and biases that hinder women from gaining rights and control over land and natural resources. Stronger women rights to land and productive assets are linked to enhanced status, improved living conditions, better nutrition, and food security, thereby improving health and education outcomes, higher earning and individual savings, and even better access to credit, as well as better protection from gender-based violence. The time has come to close the gender gap in property and land ownership, which has been exacerbated by discriminatory land tenure systems. And thank you once again to our speakers for raising the aspect of gender in land and tenure systems. And I really do appreciate all the insights you have shared to us.
Thank you so much, Ms. Shiris Kazorao. I think those are really good inputs and very encouraging for the youth also to participate. May I call on now Ms. Mirima Smaji to give her reactions as well.
Yes, hello. First of all, thank you for invitation to be part of the webinar as a student reactor. As a recent graduate of a master's program in NGO studies, I find these presentations to be both insightful and thought-provoking at the same time. The common thread among these presentations is the urgent need to address the complex and interrelated issues surrounding food security, land tenure, and sustainable agriculture. It is evident that these challenges are not confined to any specific region. They are global in nature and require collaborative efforts on a large scale. The first presentation highlights the pervasive issues of poverty, food security, and malnutrition. These problems extend far beyond Asia and touch millions of lives worldwide. The emphasis on changing dietary patterns and the growing impact of climate change transcends borders, affecting communities across the globe. The presentation focusing on the role of secure land tenure in food security underscores a universal concern. The challenges faced by pastoral communities in Kenya are representative of similar issues faced by rural populations in many countries. Gender disparities in land access and control, as well as the potential for legal empowerment, are themes that resonate internationally. The presentation, which discusses sustainable agricultural practices and the environmental challenges facing agriculture, is of global significance. The issues raised, including land resource degradation, declining yields, and the consequences of unsustainable farming practices, are not unique to Bangladesh, but are shared by agricultural communities in various parts of the world. Collectively, these presentations underscore the need for comprehensive policies and actions to address the multifaceted challenges facing our global food systems. It is clear that NGOs and other organizations dedicated to social development must take an active role in advocating for policies that promote equity, sustainability, and resilience in food production and distribution. In conclusion, these presentations serve as a reminder that issues of food security and sustainable agriculture are of paramount importance worldwide. They compel us to recognize the interconnectedness of these issues and the critical role that NGOs, governments, and communities can play in addressing these issues and advocate for a more equitable and sustainable future for all. As an NGO graduate, I am inspired by the potential for NGOs to collaborate with governments and local communities to further the cause of secure land tenure, specifically the importance of involving women in effective development. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions so far? None at the moment. Okay, let me read some of the questions here. Tony, are you there? Tony Kison?
Yep. I'm here.
Okay, there are a few questions here. Maybe you can provide some answers. First is coming from the student, or I don't know if she's a student, but Theodora Valcano from the University of Copenhagen. She's asking, what are your thoughts on the right to food sovereignty? Juan?
I thought you would have several questions.
Actually, I have several questions. Okay, let me read three more or four more. Second one relates to what are the similarities you have found regarding food systems around the world? This is coming from Miss Susana Gomez of Mexico. And then from Dorothy Peruelo, how far has the government been doing for food security and sustainability? And then related to land quality, a question from Delia Sinoro of Mapua University, Philippines. Land quality affects the quality of the food system. Hence, may I know how other countries execute the policy effectively? Should there be a lack of significant fund for land remediation to support cleanup of contaminated farmland? And then from Rosanel Romero, what are the main threats to agricultural food production in the Philippines? What provisions in the UNFCCC National Communications for Climate Change are specific to dealing with these future threats? 4 questions, Ton. You can select what you can answer before I call on Munawar.
Okay, just a few things, no. First is on food sovereignty. Part of the operationalization really of food sovereignty is being able to shorten really the distance where food is produced and food is consumed. I think that's one of the operating frameworks for food sovereignty, where you actually are able to control your inputs, control your have access to your markets, be able to talk directly to producers. We have to produce, we have to rather than talk about transferring or transporting our goods far away and getting our inputs from external sources. We rely on, we try to focus on materials that we can procure closer and also cater to markets that are nearer physically. I think that's one of the operating frameworks that we're proposing in terms of guaranteeing some kind of food sovereignty. Dealing also with local markets, but not limiting yourself to local markets. But what I'm saying, when you prioritize local markets, one of the things I thought there was a question also on land quality. I think one of the basic principle of organic farming is really taking care of the soil. And right now, I haven't seen, let's say, I haven't seen in any of the nationally determined contributions for climate change, for example, that the promotion of in terms of the promotion of organic agriculture, because there is actually a sequestration of carbon in the soil. There's an increased sequestration of carbon in the soil in terms of organic agriculture, for example. And that could be at least a policy input that could push organic agriculture even more in terms of a policy framework, that it improves, it reduces your carbon emissions, or it captures part of your carbon emissions. I wasn't sure about in terms of the similarity in food systems. I think the challenges are more common than the actual food systems. The challenges we face, and which I've outlined in the talk, I think it's also it failed in other countries, but with different degrees. For example, supermarketization is more in Southeast Asia and East Asia and China rather than in India or in Bangladesh, for example. Although there are trends already pointing to those, no, in terms of the evolution of food systems. One of the things that I forgot to say also is that there is a difference in thinking in terms of when you put when small farmers make decisions, no, and when they're given land and they make decisions, for example, on what to plant, when to plant, what varieties to cultivate, and all of that. The tendency for outsiders is to get the biggest yield at the shortest possible time. Let's say in plantation economies. In plantation economies, you cut down the whole rubber forest or rubber plantation if it's beyond its prime in about 15 years, for example. But for farmers, for actual farmers, the more important thing is not the maximization of profit or yield. The most important thing is stability and consistency. And this is what we learned in working with farmers, that when they choose, for example, what varieties to plant, when to plant, they will manage the risks in those kinds of choices. No? And this is also where the role of women as in seed selection and in seed conservation really comes in. Because when you lose your seeds and when you lose your local varieties, then you're open to, you have less capacity to cope with whatever changes that the environment will come up with. You need to come up with, you need to keep your options open. And also, even as civil society organizations, we try to promote people to do experimentation, or we encourage people to do experimentation in their own farms. Maybe I'll just stop there first.
Thank you so much, Don. Let me now call on Mr. Munawar Ahmed. She has been raising his hand for some time now. Munawar, go ahead, raise your question or whatever you want to clarify. Unmute yourself. The audio, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum and very good morning.
Good morning.
I think so there is afternoon and some people are from that part of the world. It's quite possible there is evening. Basically, Philippines is also in our heart. Filipinos are also in our heart because I served many years in Oman and I have got many good friends from Philippines. Unfortunately, I would like to tell you one important thing, a very interesting thing. I have a daughter, my own daughter here in Pakistan, and I met a person, a young girl from Philippines, and she told me that her father passed away in an accident, and afterwards she and me, we become like father and daughter. So I always say, her name is Rosa, so I always say whenever she discusses something, so you people are also in our heart. Now, I would like to say something. I serve at Ateneo University in Pakistan, Karachi, and basically I would like to convey a message to all the people, especially the farmers. You see, whenever we discuss about any area of life, especially agriculture or anything, we must know and we must convey this information to our people that knowledge has 4 levels. Number 1, we do not know that we do not know. You do not know that you do not know. What does it mean? It means basically the people are not aware of those things for which they should be aware. So the first level you do not know that you do not know. The second level, you know that you do not know. So when we are going to provide these types of workshops, seminar, conferences, so definitely people will come to know that what is exactly needed or required. At this point of time, I would like to convey congratulations to the Institute and Ateneo Institute of Sustainability, and I wish you all best of luck. And the third level of knowledge is you know that you know. So we are supposed to bring the level of our farmers at that level that they should know they should know. Because of initially, if there is no application of knowledge, they do not know that they do not know. So this was my message for you all, for the farmers from Keet, from Pakistan.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Muammar Hamed. Any more question from the floor? Here's another one. I think this one will be for David. David, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, these are questions related to land conversion. Like, do business owners from owning a part of land and making it like subdivisions instead of having our food security have an impact? And does importing really helps? Second question relates to the smallholder food producer are being wiped out from the countryside in a rapid rate through the massive conversion of agricultural lands into commercial and residential lands. How do governments in the Global South address the problem? These are questions coming from Mia Reyes, the first one, and then Wilma Salas. And then the third question coming from Uganda, from Tamusade Hamuza. A number of youth are shying away from food production due to lack of land, and those with land are selling to sugarcane growers and buying motorcycles. Is there a way you can sensitivize them locally? That's from the Ugandan perspective. David, what do you think?
Thank you so much. I'll respond to those questions. I'm glad these questions have come up because they're really pertinent questions. The first and second questions are somehow tied, and so I'll respond to them by giving example of what is happening here in Kenya. The question of privatization of land or conversion or subdivision is really a live one. I will give an example of a community somewhere in the southern region of Kenya who owned a parcel of land that was over 20,000 hectares, and the membership was about 5,000 people. So 5,000 people owning collectively over 20,000 hectares of land. And they use this piece of land for herding, for their livestock. Closer to the wetlands, they did some farming, so they practiced agropastoralism. This land really worked for them. But now, the proximity of this plot of land to Nairobi, which is the capital city of Kenya, meant that this land and these people were facing a lot of pressure for privatization of this land from business people, from companies that were operating in Kenya. Companies that needed to extend for poultry production. Others were seeking to set up factories for cement production. And so there was immense pressure. There was manipulation of the leaders of the community with the force that you need to subdivide your land. You need to subdivide this land and give it to individual households. And so each one can make a decision on how they want to use their land. And there are promises such as you can get a title, and then you can get, if you want, you can use a title as collateral to get loans from the bank. And eventually the community agreed to subdivide. And they were receiving huge chunks of land. Others were receiving up to 60 hectares per household. 5 years after the subdivision, more than 50% of the households had sold off their pieces of land to investors. 10 years down the road, these people who were originally landowners were squatters on the land which was previously theirs, or they were casual laborers for these investment initiatives that had come on their land. And so this speaks to the question of privatization or subdivision of land and its impacts on the livelihoods of the people. I just wanted to share that example and its impact. Now, across Kenya, there is a similar move, especially in those areas that are closer to urban areas. While in the larger greater north, where people practice more predominant pastoralism, there is some hesitance by communities because they've realized if we subdivide, then we kill our custom, which is pastoralism and livestock herding. And considering the nature of the land, which is semi-arid, you can't rear livestock in a smaller parcel unless you're venturing into concentrated livestock production. And so that is part of the implication, and it speaks to the broader picture of privatization and commoditization of land and how that then makes the land find its way into the hands of the fewer, richer people. The other question was about youth. Yes, there is a huge rural-urban youth migration in Kenya. I sometimes want to tie it to the education system that is nurturing the young people seems to perpetuate the fact that success is you working in the capital city or in the urban area doing a white-collar job. Besides the education system, the notion amongst local communities, local people. I remember while we went to school, we'd be told by our parents, study so hard and then go and work in the city. That already sets some precedents, sets some expectations. And there is a big move by youths. I wonder what can be done. There are organizations, CSOs, that are advocating and reminding people of the productivity of the rural areas. For example, just as I highlighted in my presentation, over 70% of livestock products are coming from the rural, from the local communities. So there's a lot of productivity, much as it hasn't been streamlined into the food system, and so they're not reaping the best benefit out of their productivity, but there needs to be efforts to enlighten the youths that the job that you're seeking in the city, yes, gives you some earning, but if you focused more in the productivity in your community, you would still earn. But again, the imbalance is then in the city, there are amenities, so that's a very live question. I like that you asked it. We can talk about it more. But as I wind up, many countries across Africa, including South Africa, Mozambique, Zambia, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, in West Africa, we've seen Sierra Leone, we've seen Liberia, are passing laws that seek to protect collectives. The expectation is that if communities are able to protect their lands collectively, it lessens the opportunity or chances to convert or monetize these lands. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much for that. Mino, are you still around? There's a question for you.
I am around, but I don't know if you can hear me. My internet goes
Okay.
on and off.
There's a question here
Can you hear me
about.
now?
Sorry. I'll read it. I'll read it. What are some
Can you hear me?
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, Patrick, can you hear me?
Okay. What are some innovative strategies and technologies that are being used to make agricultural systems more sustainable and environmentally friendly while still ensuring food security for a growing global population? This is a question from Janeline Casino coming from the Philippines. Mino?
I didn't hear the first part, but yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
It's
Did you hear the
it's
question?
really breaking. Maybe I can try to answer through the chat because it's really my internet is really really bad. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay. Thanks, Mina.
so yes,
Okay.
thank you, Carl.
Just
Carl is saying that you can hear me nice and sound. So maybe I can try to answer. I'm not putting on the video, so maybe it will solve some of the internet bundles. But what I wanted to say about it is I think there is a lot of alternative ways of doing local, and you know in Europe they're doing it a lot, but also in Africa because there is no way to have this, you know, in some area there is just local production that is providing for the local communities, and then also local production produce food for the cities in a way. So we have a really evidence-based local initiative that works, and I think we can, if we and at the global, like if you look into the poultry industry, for example, the Brazil really was exporting a lot of meat chicken meat from Brazil to other countries, and it really destroyed the local production of chicken in Kenya, in Uganda, in Zambia. Was it 2 years back? All of our grassroots women was not able to sell their chicken because of the really high the quantity of Brazilian chicken coming in was very cheap, and so I think that we cannot look into a sustainable food production at the local level if we are not addressing the issue of also global value chain. So I think
okay, we lost Mino. Anyway, she said she can write in the chat box. Okay. Can we have one last question because of the time constraint? How about Ripa? Are you still there?
Yes, well, I'm here.
Okay, there's a question here about sustainable agriculture. How can local seeds and varieties be protected since most of them are susceptible to pests and diseases? This is coming from Rwanda, Mokishimana, Denise. Did you hear it?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so that's the
Okay,
question.
thank you.
Okay. And then there's
Okay.
another one. What strategies can be implemented to make agriculture more resilient to climate change and extreme weather events? Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to answer the first question on the protection of local seed varieties. So actually, you know that quality seed is the basic input for increasing agricultural output and thereby achieving self-sufficiency in food production. So in Bangladesh, I'm just sharing one example. That is, in Bangladesh, 20 years back, the coastal farmers in coastal region, they are practiced sustainable agriculture and conserved seeds at their houses, and they conserved all type of seeds in different parts and forms. So even they exchange these seeds to their neighboring farmers and other farmers in far villages or near villages. But nowadays, the culture of seed conservation and exchange that is faded away because of corporate agriculture. And the corporate agriculture actually occupied the market. It is also available in the market, and occupied the most of the farmers' yields. So now in different areas, particularly the areas we visited in different areas in Bangladesh, when we talk with the farmers, they told us their experience, and they said the local seeds, the difference between local seeds and the corporate seeds. So they found that the hybrid seeds is not safe for the environment, and the corporate company have their representatives, and they always advise the farmers and force them to use chemical fertilizers, pesticides. But nowadays, the farmers, they realized the difference and necessity of local varieties. And many NGOs in Bangladesh, they are providing trainings and encouraging farmers for using organic fertilizers, and how to produce organic fertilizers, how to marketing these. So this type of trainings are introducing by the NGOs, but nowadays even the agricultural department, extension department in Bangladesh, they are also providing trainings and encouraging farmers conserving the local seed varieties. So actually, we think that the awareness of the farmers is very essential to preserve the local seeds. And and it is not only awareness, political commitment is also important for the preserving local seeds of varieties, because they should break the market syndicates who actually control the seed trade. And also, I think that strong farmers association is needed for raising the unified voices to giving emphasis on the need of the local varieties for sustainable farming practices. So I think this is coordinated and coordinated effort. So we should do this with the support of government, NGOs, private sectors. So all that efforts can improve the situation.
Okay. Thanks, Mino. Thanks, Ripa. Thank you for that. I think actually we have a lot more questions here, but due to time limitation, I think we will we'll stop there our open discussion. I've been requested to provide a short synthesis, and I'll try to do it now. This webinar has been very informative. We thank all the speakers, the reactors, and those who participated in the plenary discussion. After hearing all this, we know that food insecurity in the world today is very alarming and will continue to be a serious threat to the incoming generations. This will have major impacts on our health, on our environment, and the economy. Tony, in his presentation, has given us a very informative context, an interesting perspective of food insecurity and poverty in Asia. He also provided a good assessment of the problems and challenges being faced by smallholder producers. Moreover, he elaborated on some current trends that we need to be mindful of, such as the unfinished agrarian reform programs in Asian countries, land use and its connection to biofuel and water, shifting tastes and diets, climate change, and the increasing land conflicts. He also provided some recommendations, such as protecting land rights, and having a strategy for smallholder farmers, instituting protected areas for agriculture, and recognition of customary rights, and addressing the digital divide of farmers. David, in his presentation, provided us the perspective among the pastoralists and other small producers across Africa, where land producers the land is the greatest asset of the producers. It is the source of food, livelihood, and identity. Yet, customary tenure of the majority remain insecure and vulnerable. While there are initiatives to protect their collective rights, yet meaningful reforms have remained an open question. Given this context, legal empowerment, as being espoused by NAMATI, the organization of David, is seen as an effective strategy in ensuring land tenure security. In Kenya, for example, the Community Land Act of 2016 provide the legal framework to address major challenges. Sharing of the grassroots women in sub-Saharan Africa showed us the various important roles of grassroots women in the agricultural value chains. Unfortunately, they are the hardest hit by value chain abuses because of added discrimination through harmful social norms and practices. Mino recommended such advocacy work to promote sustainable and effective trade and value chains, specifically on strengthening grassroots women's voice, participation, and the benefit in agribusiness value chains. RIPA also presented to us a very informative experience of Bangladesh on sustainable farm practices and safe environment. She elaborated on the sustainable agriculture produces food that is healthy, safe for the environment, and provides fair wages to workers. It uses less agrochemicals and provides more organic matter into the soil. Unfortunately, this has changed a lot. Today, smallholder food producers in Bangladesh have to contend with the 4 C's that she mentioned: climate change, COVID-19, conflict, and the high cost of inputs. RIPA also mentioned contributing factors to the current situation of smallholder food producers, such as inadequate control and access to land. Women are not properly recognized, and the youth are not interested in agriculture. The reactions also from our students are very enlightening. The first one given to us by the student from Ateneo mentioned more about, or give emphasis more on, the importance of gender as a way of moving forward and inclusion of the youth in the activities in agriculture. Mrs. Magic, or Mirima's Magic, provided a short synthesis of what we have discussed so far, and that's really good inputs for all of us. Again, thank you for all the speakers, and let me maybe quote Tony in his final remarks. He said that he needs to emphasize the interconnectedness of people, planet, and peace. And I think that's a good reminder for all of us. Again, thank you to the speakers and partners, and good afternoon, good day to you all. Thank you.
Thank you everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Salamat.
At this point, we'd just like to, on behalf of the organizers and the working group from SDS and Philippines, we'd like to present a certificate of appreciations to our speakers and to our 2 student reactors. No? So maybe in order to save time, Carl, can you just flash one certificate which I'm going to read, which is valid for the speakers, and then we'll do the second one for the two student reactors. No? So this certificate of appreciation is presented to the speaker for his or her valuable contribution as a speaker to the Land and Food Systems webinar of the SDG2 Project's Policy and Governance on Sustainable Food Systems webinar series, given this 17th day of October 2023 via Zoom. It's signed by myself, then it's signed by Roel Ravanera in his capacity as Executive Director of the Xavier Science Foundation, and it is also signed by our Assistant Vice President from the Ateneo de Manila University that looks after sustainable development and the environment. So the same certificate is first awarded to Mr. Nathaniel Don Marquez. Maybe we can flash him. Focus on him if he's still around. Carl?
Yes, salamat. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And then the similar certificate is also awarded to Mr. Antonio Quizon. Tony, I think, is still here anyway. So the third certificate is awarded to Mr. Arak David James from Kenya for his presentation. The fourth certificate is awarded to Ms. Mino Ramaroson from the Hawaii Commission, Sub-Saharan Africa, from Madagascar. And the last certificate for the speakers is awarded to Ms. Shanjida Khan Ripa from the Association for Land Reform and Development in Bangladesh for her presentation. Thank you very much to the 5 speakers. Now we would also like to give a similar certificate for our 2 student reactors, which is also similarly worded. So I'd like to acknowledge Ms. Cheris Angel Kasurao from Ateneo de Manila University for her brilliant reaction and insight on the situation, as well as so Ms. Cheris Angel, you're there, okay? And then lastly to Ms. Marimas Magic for her brilliant summarization and synthesis, helped our chair in her comments at the end of the presentations. Thank you to all 7 speakers and reactors, and we hope that to the whole group that have stayed on. We had about 160 people up to one point, and over 120 have more or less stayed on for the rest of the afternoon. Thank you very much to all. Carl, back to you.
All right, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. For this segment, we will start our group photo. So kindly open your cameras. And we'll do this briefly.
Can we invite everybody here for your group picture taking for posterity? This is really a global webinar, so we are very pleased to have you all here in this group photos. Carl, go ahead.
All right. Okay, sir. And everyone, counting to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, another one, because this is a large group. Again, please open your cameras. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, another one. One final one. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you very much, everyone. And again, we would like to invite you to our upcoming events. Before that, we would like to invite everyone to join our food systems community dialogue. So please join through the link that I will be sending. And to add on that, our final webinar as part of our policy and governance of sustainable food systems webinar series will be on 14th November 2023. And the topic that we'll be discussing is about food waste and the environment. So please follow us on our Facebook and Instagram pages so that you can bear with our updates. And lastly, this is our first announcement. We would like to invite everyone to join our 2023 AUN-EEC workshop with the theme Reconciling with Nature through Artistic Creations. And this will be a hybrid event. And this is free for anyone, for students, faculty, and school personnel from any member institution of the ASEAN University Network on Ecological Education and Culture. So again, that will be on 9th November, and we will be releasing the announcement and the registration information this week. And also, we would like to invite our participants here in this webinar for our Baliktarin Mo. So this is a youth-led movement for climate justice using the arts, and I will be playing a short video for more information.
Baliktarin Mo, a youth-led movement for climate justice using the arts. Baliktarin Mo is the local adaptation of Turn It Around flashcards for Education Futures, a global initiative that creates a card deck which showcases what changes the youth hope to see in environmental policy and education. Each card contains an artwork on one side and text on the other. Last year, Turn It Around Southeast Asian Edition was jointly organized by the Artist Literacies Institute, the Arizona State University, UNESCO's Future of Education Initiative, and the ASEAN University Network on Ecological Education and Culture, or AUN-EEC, hosted by the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability. This year, AUN-EEC, and with various departments and units of Ateneo de Manila University, as supported by the Sandbox Residency Program of Arete Ateneo, are all organizing Baliktarin Mo, the Philippine adaptation of Turn It Around. Anyone from the Philippines under the age of 30 who has attended an activity of AUN-EEC, the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability, and Baliktarin Mo partner institutions may participate by submitting an artwork and/or a piece of writing. The process of participation has 3 phases: experience, reflection, and action. Participants will first undergo an immersive learning experience conducted by a Baliktarin Mo partner institution. These activities include nature or sustainability walks, AUN-EEC workshops, Sustainable Development Solutions network events, roundtable discussions, research projects, and field trips by the Biological Organization of Ateneo Senior High School. Based on the attended activity, participants are invited to reflect on our current environmental realities and consider whether the activity led to challenged or reinforced beliefs, guided new ways of understanding the world, evoked emotional responses, realized future actions, or led to the articulation of hopes and dreams. And then, from these reflections, create artworks or written pieces. Artworks must answer any of the following prompts flashed on screen. Here are some examples of artworks from the Turn It Around website. Submissions may also be in the form of written pieces that answer any of the prompts flashed on screen. Here are some examples from Turn It Around. But submissions are not limited to artworks and written pieces. Participants are invited to submit outputs that promote climate action and/or environmental conservation using any medium that they feel can communicate best their sentiments. Remember that our goal is to capture the voice and dreams of the Filipino youth for our environment. Focus on your own insights or reflections and let your own voice be heard. Selected submissions will be displayed in Arete's Sandbox exhibit by the end of 2023. The final deck of cards will be produced and distributed to selected schools for their use in their classroom and to policymakers and other institutional leaders in conferences and gatherings. Submissions are accepted until September 30 at go.ateneo.edu/baliktarinmo-submission. The full mechanics are also accessible through the link and the QR code flashed on screen. Baliktarin mo. We are excited to receive your submissions.
To formally close our webinar today on land and food systems, let me now call on Ms. Ophalie Alzona Fornella. Ms. Ophalie is the Director of the Office for Social Concern and Involvement, or OSCI, of the Ateneo de Manila University. She also serves as a homeroom advisor of first-year students in the Introduction to Ateneo Culture and Traditions course, and as a guest faculty or formation coach and mentor to students of the Ateneo de Manila University School of Medicine and Public Health. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Ophalie.
Thank you, Sir Ruel. I'll keep this short and sweet. So truly, this afternoon has been very enriching and eye-opening to the many challenges that we face in securing land or property rights, especially of smallholder food producers, as well as the various opportunities to participate in helping increase their agricultural productivity and income. We thank once again our speakers, Mr. Marquez, Mr. James, Ms. Ramaroson, Ms. Ripa, and Mr. Quizon. We also thank our reactors, Ms. Casurao and Ms. Smagic. We also thank Sir Ruel, who served as our moderator this afternoon, and to the numerous people and organizations from the Ateneo de Manila University, Xavier University, Ateneo de Cagayan, Ateneo de Davao University, Ateneo Institute of Sustainability, and SDSN Philippines. This is the fourth webinar on the policy and governance of sustainable food systems organized by the Working Group on SDG2 Zero Hunger Project. Yesterday, we celebrated World Food Day, and we know that many people worldwide still suffer from hunger and undernourishment. And we also know that access to land continues to be a central concern in the discourse on food security. But listening to the speakers' sharing of the efforts of various organizations, their recommendations, and of those who interacted via chat, and of course seeing also the interest of everyone in this webinar, we remain hopeful that as a community and as stewards of the earth, we can work together to achieve a more inclusive and sustainable world. Again, we thank you and we hope to see you in our next webinar.